Hi everyone, good afternoon. Thanks for joining in. It's a pleasure to meet you all. Would be great if you all can turn on your videos so we can have an engaging atmosphere. Yeah, sorry for the echo. I think the event is streaming live on YouTube as well. Yeah, so it's a pleasure to meet you all. I would be good if you all turn on your cameras. Thank you, Vinny. Thank you, Dilsha. Thank you, Binod. We have our speakers as well who have joined us, Rashi, Rhythm, and Naman. Today's event, Aditi and I will be the moderator for the discussion. We'll have the event in three parts. I'll set the context. In the initial first 10 to 15 minutes, we'll get to know more about our speakers. And in the next 20 minutes, we'll have a panel discussion and where we'll discuss all the interesting questions shared by. And in the last 15 to 20 minutes, we'll open the floor to Q&A, where you all can ask your questions from our speakers for the day. Yeah, before we kick start, hope you all have fueled up your lunch and have got your coffee so to stay awake on our Saturday afternoon. So we'll start with a quick icebreaker. So in the chat window, do drop in a one word which comes to your mind when you think of social impact consulting industry. It could be anything, any song, any feeling, any image, any GIF. Data, impact, people orientedness, welfare, corporate plus social sector, support, scale, service delivery. Good to see the different kind of words coming in. And it's these all are very well aligned with our agenda for the day. Now I'll quickly start by introducing myself and Aditi. We have been working as consultant with GDI Partners. We GDI Partners are a young and impact-driven organization. And we all share a common vision to improve the lives of people at the bottom of the pyramid and build an inclusive and equitable world. We started our journey in November 2020. And over the last 3 years, we have worked from Ajmer to Africa and from sectors from education to agriculture with 10 plus state governments, with 5 central government projects, with multilaterals, with philanthropies impacting 200 million lives. Today, we have with us Rhythm, Naman, and Rashi, who are the speakers for the day. And they all have been social sector fellows at one point of time and then have transitioned to the impact consulting sector. Their journey is filled with very diverse experiences. We'll get to know more about them in just a bit. So yeah, now we'll start with our speakers. Rhythm, would you like to start by introducing yourself to the audience?
Thank you so much, Darshita. Good afternoon, everyone, and really great to see so many of you join in huge numbers on a Saturday afternoon. My name is Rhythm, and I am a senior consultant at GDI Partners. I am leading our work with the government of Haryana on air quality improvement. And I have now spent about 5 years in impact consulting space with a formal education training in economics. Prior to GDI, I was working with a governance consulting firm, Samagra, for about 2 years. And now talking a little bit about my fellowship experience, I have done about 2 fellowships. One, I was a district development fellow with the government of Punjab, posted in Amritsar during 2020-21. And early on in my career, I've also worked as a LAMP fellow in 2014-15. So yeah, looking forward to our discussion today.
Thank you, Rhythm. It was wonderful to hear about your journey. Now let's move to Rashi. Rashi, we would love to get a snapshot of your professional journey so far.
Thank you, Darshita. Hi, everyone. So my name is Rashi, and I originally come from a growing city called Raipur in the state of Chhattisgarh. I did BCom honors from College of Vocational Studies, University of Delhi. And right after my graduation, I started the fellowship journey at Teach for India. So I joined right in the middle of the pandemic in the year 2020. And right after the fellowship, I have been working with GDI till now. Currently, I am working with the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir in the agriculture sector on a project called Holistic Agriculture Development Program, where we are working as the program management unit for implementation of 29 schemes across agriculture and allied sector. Really looking forward to the discussion today, and feel free to drop in any questions that you have at any point on the chat box.
Thank you, Rashi. Naman, can you hear us?
Yes, hi.
Sure, yeah. Please go ahead with sharing your intro and background.
Definitely. Hi, thank you, Darshita. Hello, everyone. I'm Naman Jain. I have been in the social impact space for around 4 years now. I started my journey in the space with the CMGJ program with Government of Haryana, where I was working as CM's fellow and a deputy commissioner in the Yamunanagar district. Got to explore a lot of different problem statements there, and then decided to jump into social impact space full time. I joined GDI as one of the initial team members and was with GDI for around 2.5 years. Worked on different projects all across the country on various ambitious problem statements ranging from medtech to government to citizens schemes and services, etc., etc. Now, currently, I am a chief of staff at the KP Singh Foundation, which is a philanthropic institute or the foundation started by Mr. KP Singh, the founder of DLF Group. Academically, I hold a Young India Fellowship from Ashoka University and did my bachelor's in economics from Delhi University. Looking forward to this interaction with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Naman. All these are fascinating stories indeed. Now let's deep dive into our discussion. Rhythm, coming to you. So you have been a Punjab government fellow. We would love to hear more about your backstory. What was the role you did as a Punjab government fellow, and what made you move from that to this impact consulting sector?
Right. Thank you so much for the question, Darshita. And I think what I would like to start with is by saying that impact and governance consulting space was kind of the end goal for me ever since I had started my professional journey. And I think that's largely coming from that was set up early in my career because of my training in economics. So I think a lot of as an economist, you kind of learn a lot about policies, and in the elite policy circles, you often hear this thing about it was a really great policy, but ended up failing due to poor implementation. So this sentence really early on in my career started intriguing me, that what does it take to implement good policies, and why do they end up failing when they really hit the ground? So that was the reason for me to really find a space where I could get a taste of both, where you do strategy and problem solving with the state governments, and you also implement them. So you get a taste of implementation of these strategies on the ground as well. And I think governance consulting being a space provides you with those kind of opportunities, which is where I wanted to have a space for myself as a professional. And I think for speaking about a little bit about my experience as a district development fellow with the Punjab government. So I was posted in the Deputy Commissioner Office of Amritsar district. So anything and everything that came on the plate of Deputy Commissioner largely came on my plate as well. So I ended up handling everything that he was also going through, but I chose to invest my energies into largely three things. One was the COVID management. I was lucky to work on that because that was the period I was working as a fellow in. Second was the streamlining of government service delivery in the Amritsar district. So that was my second project where I invested a lot of my energy in. And third was just the capacity building of the Deputy Commissioner Office as such. So these were the three things, apart from a lot of other things that I worked on, where I deep dived and created wins for myself and the system.
Thank you, Rhythm. That this truly shows that coming to you, Rashi, you were a TFI fellow. So, what made you make the move from being a TFI fellow to coming to GDI Partners?
Actually, for me, it was a major push during my fellowship journey as itself and a session that they had in fellowship, the Pathway Exposure series. But I'll come to that. So for me, unlike Rhythm, it was not very clear that I want to do governance consulting as a job profile. But during my college journey, it became very clear that I want to do something in the development sector. While I was doing my graduation, I was involved with the student body called Enactus, where we had different social entrepreneurship projects where we used to work with communities like goat herders, magicians, cobblers. And while working with them, I realized I had much more inclination towards working in the development sector or maybe an intersection of business and development. And hence, I started looking for more opportunities. How can I build my career within this sector? And I got to know about these fellowships which are existing in the ecosystem. During the Teach for India Fellowship, they had this session called the Pathway Exposure series, where they try to guide you uh, or help you find your place in the larger development ecosystem, since this is such a big place for and it is such a growing industry right now. So what they had was a kind of a Venn diagram where you identify the issue that you want to work with, the role that you want to work on, and the level of impact that you want to create. And hence you just internalize that, try to identify where you want to go. For me, I wanted to work on diverse problem statements. I knew problem solving and designing structures, designing plans for how to go about smaller challenges during my fellowship is something that I really enjoyed. But there was no specific problem statement. I equally enjoyed working in my classroom and my community with the mothers of my children. So there was no specific problem stated that I wanted to be restricted to. So that was one thing. In terms of role, it was very clear that problem solving, program management is something that I am looking forward to. And the level of impact, I really wanted to work in the policy sector somehow. So given the amalgamation of all three, governance consulting seemed to be the best role for me, and hence I came here.
Thank you, Rashi, for sharing that. That truly shows that the spirit of courage to being outside one's comfort zone. Now, coming to Naman, good to see you, Naman. So you have done two types of fellowship via IF and CMGGA. What made you take the leap from from the CMGGA to then coming to GDI Partners?
Right. So as Rhythm mentioned, she is also an eco graduate. I'm also an eco graduate. During my time at Ramjas, I did an internship with Center for Civil Society where we were analyzing the impact of G2C schemes and services. And surprisingly, that seems to be my focus area in the governance space. CCS was the same thing. I did a project in CMGJ as well. Then when I came to GDI, I was also doing a project which was focused on G2C schemes and services. But the real transition to the social impact space or the social impact consultancy space happened during the CMGJ program, where it was an in-depth program where I got to deep dive on some 8 odd modules working across sectors like education, skilling, women's safety, solid waste management. And that is when I realized the power of working at scale. And secondly, working with the government specifically, because that's the major level for change if you want to do something in India. So that is when I shifted to this space. From the long-term perspective, I've been very clear about 3 things about the jobs that I pick up. First is the scale and the quality of impact that I can achieve through whatever I'm pursuing. Second, does it allow me to grow professionally and personally? And third, does it allow me to experience a variety of sectors and get to also meet a lot of different people across various institutes or various types of journeys? And when I came to GDI, that's precisely what I got at GDI as well, where I worked across, I think, 4 odd states on 5 different projects and various philanthropies, various organizations. And at KPSF also, I have the same mindset where I'm exploring multiple sectors here from the other side of the table, which is from the funding or the foundation side.
Thank you, Naman, for sharing that holistic perspective. Now let's dive deeper into the intricacies of the impact consulting sector. So, Rhythm, coming to you, can you throw some light on how the hiring process work, and particularly for the people who have work experience, say 2 to 4 years of work ex?
So Darshita, your voice was breaking, but if I understand you correctly, you mentioned that what does the hiring process look like, and how, like, what is the relevance, like what should be the pathway for people with 2 to 4 years of experience, right? Like,
Right.
got it. So I think hiring process is generally standard in impact consulting, governance consulting space. It's mostly standardized. First round is about like you submitting your own application, and there are like a couple of questions where you try to like answer and speak about yourselves. They're just to understand how you think about impact space, what are your aspirations, and how you fit in the culture of impact space in general. That's one. Second round is generally around an assignment which is testing you on your hard skills. It could require you to submit a concept note. It could require you to do some data crunching and submit a presentation. So that's generally the second round around the process. And then it entails 2 to 3 rounds of interviews depending on the firm that you're applying in, the role that you're applying in, and the company that you're applying to. So some companies take 2 rounds of interviews, some end up taking 3. One is more like focused on a case that is that you're required to solve, where you're given a governance consulting or an impact consulting case, and you're required to solve it during your interview. And another is a more longer interview of sorts, where you're also tested for your value system, your cultural fit into the organization, along with a consulting case during the interview. So that's the crux of the process. On what people with experience should be, I think, looking at, I think it's generally like 2 things, right? One is where you are, one is like the space is looking for problem solving skills. So that is like the base of it. And the solutions that you're coming up with do not hold as much value. It's generally the process and approach that you take to reach that solution is something that matters. Second thing, I think, as you have more experience, the relevance of that experience to where you're charting out to now becomes more important. And during the process of the interview, during solving your cases, through the interview process, how you're using your work experience into building those solutions becomes very important, especially if you worked in the impact consulting space, have done a fellowship, which gave you the nuances of implementation. So how you're using those insights from your real life experience to build solutions which are grounded in reality and speaking to the beneficiaries becomes very important through the interview process.
Thank you, Ridham, for sharing those insights. Now, Rashi, can you throw some light on how does the process work for those who are the younger folks? Given you were a BCom grad and then you did the TFI fellowship and then came to GDF.
Process more or less is very similar to what Ridham has just explained right now. It's similar to it follows the same structure where you have one case interview, then you are having one case plus fit interview with people and demonstrating your previous experiences that you have, specifically talking about the relevance of the experience that you have had. It's just that when we are talking about the case studies, the problem statements might either be much more specific and much more detailed, so that you can, think it through and not get overwhelmed as a fresher while solving this problem statement. And apart from that, there is also a lot of nudges that you receive from the interviewer at times, and it's okay to accept them and think more on that particular line. So that's all.
Yeah. Thank you, Rashi. We'll come to interviews and resume also in a while. But before that, coming to you, Naman. So want to understand how can the grassroots experience help someone to position himself or herself as a consultant in the impact sector?
That's a great question, Darshita. I think when we spend a significant amount of time on the grassroots and interact with a lot of beneficiaries, citizens, implementing organizations, government officials, we learn a lot about the sector, which otherwise might take a longer period of time. Two or three things that, specifically that come to my mind is that first is, are we able to think from the citizen's perspective, and are we able to understand their pain points? And what are some of these components? First, will they be able to access the components of the programs that we are structuring? Do they have those touch points readily accessible to them? Second, how will their interaction look like? Are there any pain points in their interaction process that we need to take care of? If we are doing it digitally, can they first access some sort of hardware through which they can avail these digital facilities? Third, is there any other target audience that we are completely missing out of the picture? Right, and which might have various different pain points altogether. So that is the first point, I think, which we are able to, which we are able to understand better when we come from grassroots. Second, awareness about ground realities. So sometimes the programs are very well structured, very well planned, but something is missing in the implementation aspect of it. It can be things like, are our monitoring systems well in place? I remember when I was at CMGJ program and during the first wave of COVID, the system was, very much burdened by all these reporting and monitoring systems that were at place. So when we did an analysis, we realized that, there are 10 reports going on in a day, and there's a 60% overlap between all of those reports. And hence, there's an opportunity to compile all of them and save much valuable time for the ground officials. And third, I think, is, how can we, when coming from grassroots, we are also able to firsthand witness a lot of interaction between minute social components as well, or the policy components as well. The biggest example that comes to my mind is, again, from the migration crisis of COVID first wave. Nobody really thought, that lockdown will lead to lakhs of people going through, passing through various districts of Haryana, Punjab, UP to reach their hometown in Western UP or Bihar. And when you see those first interactions, when you see these interactions firsthand, it really opens up your horizons and perspective in terms of how can one small intervention lead to various other results or various other implications later on in the future. So I think these are the main things that, a person who has worked on ground at grassroots level can bring to the table when they're applying for an impact consultancy role.
Thank you, Naman. That was indeed very helpful. Now we live in a 21st century and there is so much information out there. So Rhythm, can you help us understand, if I am a CMGJ fellow or a Punjab government fellow or a MP Nipun fellow, so what should be the ideal roadmap for me for the next 1 year? If I'm sure that after a year, I want to join the impact consulting sector, be it the CSR consulting or the government consulting or non-profit consulting.
Right. Thank you for that question, Darshita. I think it's very relevant to what we're talking about today. But the honest answer is that there is no ideal roadmap, so to say. And I think it's really about the dots connecting and also the universe working in your favor to really make the ends meet. But having said that, I think I can kind of speak for the choices I made to ensure that the journey is smooth. And there's only a logical flow from having done multiple fellowships to a governance consulting space. So I think one is just, tech and data really ends up playing a huge role in how we approach policies and their implementation today in impact consulting space. So one is when we're even like thinking of strategies, tech plays a huge role, and implementation is highly driven through tech today. Second is it's supported by data a lot, right? Like a lot of data analysis and data-backed decision-making happens today within the governments as well. So I think consciously embedding that into your day-to-day work and getting yourself familiar with it, building your comfort with tech and data through your experience during your time as a fellow really enables you and helps you make your profile and experience relevant to consulting. And the path also is smoother once you've entered the space. It's not only till the time you are outside and trying to apply, but also once you enter the space, it only becomes more familiar. So that I think is one. And second, I think is if the space that you're working in the fellowship that you're working in, really allows you to pick up problem statements that of your own choice. So like Naman also mentioned, right, he also picked out opportunities and work experience where he could kind of understand different sectors. So I think always, like, if you're in that kind of a space where your fellowship is giving you open choices to pick up problem statements, one should always pick up problem statements that are relevant to consulting, governance consulting. So speaking from my own example, I think where I earlier spoke that I picked up 3, right? Like one was COVID management, another was streamlining service delivery in Punjab, and then capacity building of DC office. These were very conscious choices, basis that, what is it that I can really deliver in 1 year, where I can create wins for myself and the system. And what is it that it will give me a flavor of a governance consulting? So, for example, streamlining service delivery in the district, right? Like the approach that I followed as an individual is exactly what we do as teams in our day-to-day programs, right? Like I did a top-down problem solving, did stakeholder consultations, also partnered with IIM Amritsar to just get some technical expertise, did a lot of data analysis on how many services end up getting demanded, how many people are there, is there a balance, what centers are overloading with citizens and what centers are going free. There was an element of public awareness. So all of that, I think, also really feeds into what you do as a consultant as well. So if the opportunity is there, and if your space that you're working in allows, one should pick up problem statements more consciously to build a relevant experience and profile as a consultant, I would say.
Thank you, Ridham. That was indeed very helpful for everyone. And now coming to you, Rashi, as we all know that our resume is the first impression with the employer. So how should one go about creating an impactful resume that highlights all the skill sets and experiences required to join this niche sector?
Yeah. Thank you, Darshita. That's actually a very relevant question. Resume is actually just the first space for you to showcase your capabilities as a consultant. Every time you go to a client, first thing that you have to do is explain to them in the simplest and the shortest manner what you are trying to convey. And through your resume, you are doing the same thing with your recruiter. So the first thing that you really need to keep in mind, like Ridham said in her answer as well, is the relevance of the experience that you are talking about. So not only choosing the problem statements which will bring relevance to your profile, but also showcasing them according to the job that you are applying for. For example, if you are applying for an impact consulting job profile, it's very important that you only pick up not fill the overall resume with everything that you have done in your life, but rather choose the experiences which are relevant to the job profile of a consultant, like problem solving, leading a team, any situation where your communication led to some outcome, building partnerships, anything, any places where you have showcased these skills, you try to prioritize that and bring that forward through the resume. That is the first thing. Second thing is to keep it very concise, very short, and not detailed long paragraphs about the experience that you have. When I'm talking about paragraphs, I also think that what matters is not just telling what you have done in the experience that you have had, but to specify what is the outcome that this particular activity or intervention led to. Focus on the numbers or the result that you have brought in. What is the overall shift that your intervention has led to in that particular project is something that is really, really important. And last thing I would say is not to use too many jargons of the work experience that you have had. Keep it very simple so that anyone with any experience can understand what exactly is the skill that you have demonstrated at this particular place. So these would be a few inputs that I have for you. Something that you can do while building your resume is to also focus on some hard skills that you can specify in your resume. It can be data analysis through advanced Excel. It can be building wireframes through Figma, something that you can learn in a very short period of time. And if you have time right now, when you start applying for impact consulting roles. It's always beneficial to have some very specific hard skills in your resume. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Rashi. Indeed, that's the combination of the soft skills and hard skills required for this sector. Now, once we get a foot inside the door, so the next step is the case interviews. So can you shed some light, Naman, on the case interviews part? How can one effectively prepare for these interviews?
So I think first is the mindset of an interviewee, right? So a lot of times interviewee have a mindset that, the case interviewer is asking or looking for a reason to reject them. But in high quality consulting firms, at least, the case is completely the opposite. We are generally looking for reasons to accept you, seeing you, how you approach a particular problem statements, how do you communicate your results. And that is where we also, nudge you a lot of times, as Rashi mentioned, right? Especially if you are a fresher, we give you some prompts, we give you some nudges to help you through, figuring out the case. So that's one thing. Second thing I think is don't fall into the fallacy of pre-structured or pre-made frameworks. So generally there is a tendency in candidates to fit a particular problem statement into some predefined structure that they have seen or read somewhere, which really completely derails the case. Get into a habit of creating those structures from scratch, and you'll find a lot of good content online. If you're following, similar firms, or if you are looking for how to prep for consulting interviews, there are a lot of good content which allows you to create a mindset and to create a process of creating these frameworks, and that will help you in really, cracking any problem statement that comes your way, irrespective whether you know the content or not. We don't really expect you to know the content beforehand. Third, be humble. Again, going back to Rashi's point, if you don't know something, don't faff. Don't try to come up with something. It's okay to say that, I don't have any information about the sector, and accept some suggestions from the interviewer. And also structure your notes well. When we are, doing a case study, we really, make haphazard notes. Neither the interviewer can see what you have written, or nor they are able to follow it, nor you are able to follow it up when you are concluding, everything at the end of the interview. So I think these are some 3 or 4 things that will help you in cracking the case study interview round.
Thank you, Naman. Now, coming to your fellowships part, since you all have been in the fellowship journey, so how did the fellowship serve as a catalyst in your impact consulting journey? What were the learnings you acquired during your time as a CMGJ fellow, TFI fellow, and a Punjab government fellow? Want to hear from all of you. Rhythm, would you like to start?
Cool. Thanks for the question, Rashi. I think I've already spoken briefly about it, but I'll just reiterate. I think there are 2 types of learnings that I've had. One is on the skill set that you need, and second is something around like what does it take to really be in this space. So one, I think, is around the skill sets. First, I would like to speak. I think while problem solving is at a base of consulting, be it business consulting or be it impact consulting, I think in impact consulting, what becomes more relevant is the solution mindset, right? Like not just that you're able to solve problems on paper, but amidst chaos and ambiguity, you're also able to tell yourself and others that ho jayega, kar lenge. I think that becomes very important as just a mindset to have in an impact consulting space. So that is one. Second, I think, is just the resilience that it takes to be in this space, right? Like impact is not easy to see. It is not like governance. It is not like business consulting where you presented your solution in a 3-month time and the company started seeing profits in the next quarter. It will take years to come, and just to have the ability to stay at it, I think speaks volumes about how you will succeed in this space as a professional. So I think that is second. Third, I think is something related with what Naman had mentioned earlier, right? Like being just empathetic to your end beneficiaries and the users in the space. So it will really help you build solutions that are grounded in reality, that are solving the needs of the users and beneficiaries, and are also simple to implement. So I think these are just like, there are other skill sets, of course, but like to me, these 3 are the most important if you really want to have a sustainable career in this space. So that is one. Second, I think, is the learning around how logistics essentially become the failure points of good policies when they hit the ground during implementation at scale. So, right, and I can really give an example here. My first assignment as a district development fellow was to set up a data cell for COVID review and monitoring in Amritsar district, right? Like we had received a notification from the state that you have to do this and you have to set up a data cell so that we can at a state level monitor the data. Now, given that was my first project, I ended up asking the deputy commissioner to come with me for a site identification. And when I first saw the site, I was like, yeah, this room looks good. And, we should be able to set it up here. And just then he started going into the nuances of asking questions like, ye pankha chalta hai, chala ke dekho to wo nahi chala. It didn't work, right? And then second thing, like around how many, like he ended up doing like a quick guesstimate around how many computers will we need given the caseload in Amritsar. Will teachers be aligned to travel this longer distance during COVID to do data entry every day when schools are shut, right? Like the small nuances around logistics and implementation really end up becoming the failure points of good strategies, good policies, was my second learning. So how you can kind of bake all of that in during your top-down problem solving. And a lot of it, again, comes from resilience and empathy is something that I think I learned and has stayed with me through my professional journey, is what I would like to say.
Thank you, Rhythm, for sharing those personal anecdotes and the insights from the ground. It's indeed that we are trying to solve the wicked problems and it's not easy. Rashi, would you like to go next?
I completely agree with every little thing that Rhythm just said. For me as well, it was very similar. For me, my experience as a teacher in a classroom during the fellowship really helped me go back and design the similar kind of structures at state level for all the teachers working in Uttar Pradesh while I was working on my first project here at GDI. So yes, understanding those ground nuances, how things actually look like at ground, plus understanding how people act and what are the design people-centric solutions rather than designing just solutions that look good in idea is something that has really helped me. That's how my fellowship experience is helping me currently in my work. I would add one more point, which is more of a mindset point. I did my fellowship during the COVID years. So it was during 2020 to 2022. And for us, it was like schools being shut down, then reopening, then being shut down again. And as a fellow, I had to redesign my plans every time, be very flexible with whatever interventions that I was planning in my classroom. And I thought this uncertainty is something which is due to COVID, but that's not true. Everything is uncertain at all times. And that really helped me design much more flexible, adaptable plans while I am doing my work right now as a governance consultant at the state level. So yeah, just keeping in mind that uncertainty is going to prevail is something that my fellowship really taught me, and I think is still applicable through the situation.
Thank you, Rashi, for sharing that. Naman, we would like to hear from you now.
Covered most of the points. I just like to add on to their experience and give some anecdotes maybe. So the huge learning for me was stakeholder management and conflict resolution. I remember there was supposed to be a third-party assessment for government schools next day. And the previous day, all the teachers went on strike for some reason. So we had nobody who would administer those tests and, we'll have the results. And those tests were really important for us to know how is the learning quality currently at those government schools and where are the gaps so that we can design relevant opportunities. Now, how do you resolve this conflict with a strong teacher community one evening before you are supposed to administer this test, right? So what sorts of resources can you pull in? Who are the relevant people you can reach out to? How do you understand their problems and try to resolve their problems so that we can reach a negotiation? So I think that was the major part. We used to, jump between 4 projects in a typical day. Morning we will be talking to deputy commissioner, evening tak we'll be going to some field visits, talking to students, talking to teachers, etc. So that becomes a very interesting, a skill to have when you are working as an impact consultant as well, because sometime you will be talking with really nuanced philanthropists or really intellectual researchers, etc. And at the same time, you'll also be dealing with a lot of clerical staff to get things rolling on ground. And they'll have different modes of working, different modes of communication, different preferences that you need to break through. Second, I think, is the networking and awareness about different sectors. So because I was in a CMGJ program, most of my batchmates are still in the development space and are working with great institutions across the country and abroad. So as an impact consultant, now I have a window to reach out to them for collaborations, to know more about a specific sector. If I'm designing something in, let's say, healthcare, so I can reach out to various people who are working in that space. And that networking bit also unlocks a lot of opportunities when you are entering the space, as well as after you have entered the space for collaborations and etc. So I think these are the two additions with respect to other things that were mentioned by Ridham and Rashi.
Thank you, Naman. Now, coming to your job in particular, Ridham, what is it that you do in your day-to-day job as a senior consultant at GDI?
So I think what my day looks like as a senior consultant, so we're currently placed at the Haryana Pollution Control Board at Panchkula, and the 9 to 5 really goes in stakeholder meetings, consultations, and that ranges from both junior stakeholders to senior stakeholders, typically in a day. And I think evenings generally go around like having internal team discussions, problem-solving sessions, and thinking around how we can take our different work streams forward. So all in all, I think it's full of vigor and energy, and it's exciting space to be working in. And I think that's pretty much what my day looks like.
That shows very beautifully the life of a consultant. Now, coming to the last question for the panel discussion before we move to the next part for the session. Naman, can you briefly summarize for everyone that what are the transferable skill sets one can bank upon while making the switch from this fellowship to impact consulting sector?
Again, great question, Darshita. So I think apart from the things that we have already discussed with respect to grassroots knowledge, stakeholder management, problem solving, communication, etc., the major point is, I think, obviously, we are able to identify gaps or potential gaps in some of the projects or some of the planned projects. For example, as Ridham was mentioning, right? Okay, if we are doing an intervention, does the infrastructure exist to support that intervention? I remember when I was with JDI and we were designing Mission Bunyad program, we wanted to establish tab labs, but because we had worked on ground, we knew that do these labs have grills on their windows? Otherwise, if you establish the tab lab today, you won't find any tablet tomorrow morning or tomorrow evening. Right. So those sort of nuances really help you in designing the program. And as Ridham put it, circumvent those logistical or operational gaps that might arise. Second, manage senior stakeholders. Because when you're working as a fellow specifically for DDF or CMGJ, you're working with very senior bureaucrats who are very much senior to you. For example, the bureaucrats I worked with, their experience was more than my age at that point of time. Right, so they had a tremendous bank of knowledge, and they were very highly intellectual as well. So how do you keep them engaged? How do you add to their value rather than being a burden on them? Right, so that sort of nuance. How do you prepare for those meetings? How do you take out actionables from those meetings? Because government meetings can also be very effective as well as ineffective based on how you are running the show. And third, I think very critical was how do we navigate the bureaucracy? How do we find those relevant people who can get things rolling? How can we find those guidelines, those policies, that one letter that was released by the chief secretary a couple of years ago, but will help you move things right now when you're implementing a project. So these are very highly useful skills that you learn as a fellow, and that we can that help us when we are designing programs as a consultant also.
Thank you so much, Naman, for sharing those insights. With this, we come to an end for the panel discussion. Now, Aditi from my team, from my team, GDI Partners, will take it forward from here. Over to you, Aditi.
Yep. Thank you. Thanks, Darshita. Thank you, Ridham, Rashi, and Naman for answering all the questions, and to everyone for being such an engaged audience throughout this session. we've covered a lot of ground today, and I know that there might be like some burning questions on your mind. So I'll be opening the floor to questions, and here's how it will work. So if you have a question, you can raise your hand and I'll call on your name and unmute you. And kindly keep the questions restricted to the theme of the session, which is social sector fellowships in consulting. And if you have a question for a specific panelist, you can mention their name when you're asking the question. Apart from that, if you don't want to ask your questions openly, you can also send me a direct message in the Zoom chat. But we'll get to the questions in the chat after we are done with the questions from people who have raised their hands. So, yeah, okay. Sure, Dilshad, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Darshita, for beautifully conducting this panel, and thank you, speakers, Ridham, Rashi, Naman, and thank you, Aditi, to you as well. And my question is direct. I'm a CM Fellow, Government of Meghalaya. I've been working for last 1 year here. And so my question is like, usually this fellowship is for 1 year, right? And some maybe for a couple of years. So when you complete this 1 year, couple of years, then the question is either you get extension or you like move for another things, right? So let's say there's two options, extension, and you may also look for another fellowship, which is more attracting, right? So my question here is, should we jump for another fellowship after one, or like should we go into the professional space of consulting and look for that? That's question number one. And second is, when you are in fellowship, you work on a lot of various issues, right? So that generalist versus specialist debate also kicks in. Like in the initial years of your career, you have to be like generalist or specialist. And like when you make that conscious decision to like specialize, no?
All right, thanks, Dilshad. Naman, Rhythm, if you guys want to take this question out.
I can take the first. So I think the question here to answer is, and there's no specific answer, right? It depends on what you want to do as in your career. But I think, Dilshad, the main question you should answer is, are you going to have if you go for another fellowship, or if you extend your fellowship, are you going to have a 2 years of experience post the fellowship, or are you going to have a 1 year of experience repeated twice during the fellowship, right? So are you going to learn new things? Irrespective of whether you are getting an extension or applying for any other fellowship, and will that feed into your longer term career goal, right? So I think that is how one can think about it. Rhythm, Rashi, if you want to add anything to it.
I think I fully agree with what Naman said. I can just add one point. Another thing to look at it is, it's very like thinking about making career switches and changing jobs as well. So when you are at the end of 1 year of your fellowship, one key thing that I could also look at is, have I met the outcomes that I had set for myself, or will it take for me another 3 months or 6 months to achieve them, both at my own personal growth end and also at the project that I've taken up. So maybe like that is also another factor to think about, because it will really give you that satisfaction when you move on from that place, that okay, you achieved those outcomes that you had intended to. And second, that it will also close the loop and add to your profile when you start applying for jobs later. So that I think is the only point I can add to.
I'll take up the question on generalist versus specialist here, because that is something even I have been thinking during my professional journey a lot. And I have been debating if being a generalist right now in my career is a good option. But I'll just tell you one thing, Dilshad, that it's not that you will always be a generalist and you're not building some kind of specialization even with the work that you are doing here. I'll give an example. I was previously working in the education sector in the state of Uttar Pradesh, where I was doing capacity building of the DIETS and SCERT, which is the academic body building all the academic resources for the state. Now I have moved to the agriculture sector, and I am working here on a problem statement related to delivering advisories to the farmers. And we are working in direct alignment with the agriculture universities of the state. So even though the sector is completely different, the stakeholders are completely different, the process that I followed for capacity building of these stakeholders is very similar in both of these spaces. And there are cross learnings across sectors, which I'm applying from my previous project to the current project. So it's more about the skill set that you are building as an individual rather than the specialization. But totally at the end of the day, it's a personal call. So just wanted to share that.
All right. Thank you. Thanks, Rashi. I think, Saurabh, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So my question is for Rhythm. So Rhythm, hello Rhythm. I am Saurabh. I am working as a DDF Firozpur in Punjab. You have worked in Amritsar for the same profile. So my question is very specific. Like, if I want to become a consultant, then what kind of projects should I opt right now? This is the one question. The second question is, as you have mentioned during the second round of hiring process is required a problem solving skill as well as the technical skills, how we are presenting those solutions. So what kind of technical skills should we learn now? And is that matter? This is the 2-year fellowship program. So is that matter for the GDI if I left after 1 year and I have done only 1 year of fellowship? And the second question is for GDI. If as you are working in as you are working for the Haryana government, so you have to live in Haryana or you have to only work from the Delhi office only? Yes.
Thank you for the questions, Saurabh. Those are very small questions put into one together. So I think I'll just take the last question first. Yes, teams are typically based out of program locations. So a team working in Haryana with the government of Haryana will be placed out of the state capital, typically in Chandigarh, Panchkula, and like another team working in Rajasthan would be placed out of Jaipur. So that's how it works for us. There are a couple of programs happening with central ministries and other private agencies as well. Those typically, those teams are typically located out of Delhi office. So that is the last question that you'd asked. I've answered, taken the liberty to answer that first. On your question on the kind of projects that you can take up, right? Like, so I think again, a lot of these are personal calls and personal choices in terms of what you resonate with and what sectors you want to explore. But one thing that I can say about the District Development Fellowship and how it is different from CMGJ Naman, can also add here, is basically, it's not very centrally controlled, right? Like you have a lot of space for yourself to pick up projects. So I think that that has its pros and cons, but I think if you look at it as an opportunity, you can really explore the sectors that you resonate with and you would want to personally explore in public policy. That is one. And however, I think I will reiterate what I'd said during the panel discussion as well, that you can kind of always ensure that it has elements of governance in it, right? Like you're not doing, let's say, you're not sitting back in a DC office and doing a pure research study. You've actually gotten your hands dirty in implementing something, and then you'll obviously come across the nuances of implementation. That is one. And second thing is, you know, building skills around the use of technology, use of data. So it could, again, like how Rashi mentioned earlier, it could range from something very simple, like a Microsoft Word, Excel, to building wireframes and using platforms today like Figma. So all of those skills I think are helpful if you like to use, and if you think they are relevant to the kind of day-to-day work that you're doing. So and I think from my time I can share that there were people working in Firozpur on, let's say, water and sanitation, to me working on service delivery, to somebody else working on aspects of education. So really that's a call that you need to make with yourself, the sectors that resonate with you. And I think on the technical skills also, I've covered that part. On 1 or 2 years of experience, I will go back to what we had shared with Dilshad as well, right? Like, I think the fellowship gives you an option to drop out after first year, which is what I also did. But again, it's a very personal choice to think about whether it's a same experience repeated twice, or you're getting a new experience in your second year. And secondly, the outcomes that you'd set for yourself in both the program that you're taken up and from your own personal growth perspective have been met. So
is that matter to the GDI?
Not really, but like, yeah, what the work that you've done and the skills that you come up with, the wins that you've created for yourself will obviously be looked at when your profile is kind of being shortlisted.
Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, Rhythm. Grace, you can go ahead.
Hi. So I think most of it was answered already, but still, if you could tell the technical skills, because I understand soft skills are very important, but the hard skills and the technical skills, that would, like, if you could tell a list of it that would come in use and which should be something that you could put up on your resume.
Rashi, do you want to take this up?
I think it's simple only, like Rhythm just mentioned right now. Very specifically, if you talk about technical skills, you can either talk about problem solving, design thinking, if you have done any course related to that previously. Then data analysis is definitely one of the skills that is expected in the sector. Advanced data analysis is preferred. Then you have simple, I think it depends on project to project, but sometimes product development is also one of the hard skills that is looked for in the sector, but again, not a compulsory skill to have. Communication, team leadership, all of these skills are expected in the sector as well. So yeah.
All right. Anmol, you can ask your question.
I think one more thing I can add before we move on to everything that Rashi said, and it falls in the gray area of falling somewhere between hard skills and soft skills, Grace. But like what I think add is just like a lot of these problem statements that will come across in the impact space are generally very ambiguous. So right, like the skill to quickly scope out that under this ambiguous umbrella, what are the specific problems? So this is what we call scoping in consulting space. So, but to really be able to, talk to stakeholders and do some secondary research, do some data analysis, and then come to a specific problem statement that will be required to solve to really meet the ends of that bigger umbrella of ambiguous problem statement, I think also comes in handy. And the word that we use here is scoping. And I think there are a lot of nuances to it through the session that we've covered. Raman spoke about stakeholder management that comes in handy through it. Secondary research and being good with Excel comes in handy when you're doing that. Just like top-down problem solving and using, different approaches to just boil down yourself to a specific problems comes in handy when you're doing this. So I think, yeah, that's also something that you can always learn.
Thanks, Rhythm. Anmol, you can go ahead.
Hi. This session has been incredibly relatable and so much to look forward to. I had similar case when I was implementing a model school project in Kanwa district. I'm a Mahatma Gandhi National Fellow here. So my fellowship comes to an end in October. And I have two questions. One relating to the fellowship comes to an end in October, and while I am scouting out roles in consulting, how does a gap of 1 or 2 months look on the resume for a consulting profile? That's my first question, because I'm very confused. It's not that I have not thought of doing something meanwhile, because I have worked on some projects here in Kanwa, which I would like to stay with self-help group, but which I could do in meantime if that happens. Another question is, it's relatable to what we had previously. So when we talk about hard skills, do we need certifications from some particular websites that the consulting firms rely on, feel that they have, more value, add more value and sort of prove them on the profile? Yes, those two questions.
So I think I can take the first question, and Anmol, it's very relatable and I've been a big fan of, taking a couple of months of break when you're thinking of switching. So after YIF, I took a couple of months. After CMGG, I decided to take a couple of months and just, cool down from the from the hectic schedule. After GDI as well, I took a couple of months off to figure out the next steps and also to see where I'm heading in my career. So there is no, I think there is no issue with having a couple of months to yourself and exploring your personal goals or professional goals, and maybe just traveling around the world, right? The thing to, I think what I would suggest is how do you effectively use those couple of months is really important for you as well as for your story when you are applying for various jobs, right? Are you making use of them? It can be in professional capacity or personal capacity. And do you feel satisfied with yourself that you have not wasted time on your personal front? And when you are applying for jobs, typically, I don't think anyone in these days really ask, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Ridham, Rashi, but nobody really cares about if you have taken a gap, right? At GDI, I remember we had a lot of people who were UPSC aspirants and they had a 2 to 3 year gap as well, right? And that's completely fine.
Okay. Isn't that
Completely agreed. Completely agreed with what Naman says. And it's more, we are the only ones who worry before taking the time off rather than anyone else. No one really focuses on that particular time. So if you need that for yourself, definitely go ahead.
Anmol, I think we're living in a space where maybe like 1 year is something that you might have to justify to your interviewer, but 1 or 2 months, I don't think you need to take that much pressure for. So.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
I think there was a second question
Oh.
which Anmol mentioned, which was
About
regarding
the certification for the hard skills. Is there any preference to? Yes.
are there any preferences? I'm not aware of any, core certificate course that, will give you an edge when you're applying. Definitely, as I think Rashi mentioned, having some skills with respect to, if you are good at data analysis, if you are good at problem solving, if you have done any maybe a pro bono project with some firm, which shows your interest in the space as well. Those are really helpful. But I don't think you need to, spend your money and get a certificate. Not required at all. Skills matter. And you'll get to showcase those skills during your interview process and the case study and the concept note process anyway.
And I think I can add to that. Another way to look at it and more would be, instead of putting certification on your resume, it's best to add the relevant work experience or line item on your resume, which justifies you having had that skill and showcased it in your work during your tenure as a fellow or in your prior work experience. That I think really helps instead of really mentioning a blank certification, and I think will also add more value in your further selections than a certification.
Okay. Thank you.
Before we move on to the next question, I'll just hand it over to Darshita for a minute. She'll just share like some of the final next steps and a couple of resources with everyone, and then we can go back to the Q&A.
Sure. Thank you, Aditi, and thank you so much, everyone, for your time on a weekend to come and join this session. So I have 3 things to share with you as the next steps. First, we have a small anonymous Google form. It will help us get the feedback on how was the session and help us organize better events for you in the future. And second is, many of you asked us for the resources for the CV and case prep and for the interviews in the Google form and during the, I think, in the chat window as well. So we have made a big list of the best resources out there. You can refer to those case books and the other blogs and other resources. So we'll share that in the chat window. And third, we don't end our learnings here. We carry forward our learnings. So we have made a community for you all to stay connected and get to know each other better. So it's our LinkedIn group, Nation Builders Network. Since we are all contributing to this vision of nation building, so we'll share the link in the chat window. You all can join the group. So if we have any future events, we'll keep you posted over there, and you all can also network with each other in that group. Aditi, can you share the next steps?
Yes, I'll share it. Yeah, I'll share it in a bit. Till then, we can move on to Mayank. Yeah, Mayank, you can unmute yourself. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you, Aditi. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, thank you, Naman, thank you, Ridham, and thank you, Rashi, for the wonderful insight. It was really helpful. My journey has been slightly different, which I would like to point out. So after having 4 years of experience, 6 months ago, I decided to, get into the development consulting sector. And the first thing that I did was to apply for GDI itself. So I thought, okay, problem solving, this is something I know. But then I realized, okay, no, it's not there. Though fellowship was one of the options that I had, but I choose to, go for a formal education in public policy. And currently I'm pursuing public policy from Indian School of Public Policy. So my question is that for people who are not in the fellowship, but are doing a similar kind of thing in terms of skilling or building themselves, how could their journey be? I mean, in terms of getting into the social impact consulting? What are the things that we should focus on?
Naman, do you want to begin?
No, I'm just reflecting back on my YF journey and trying to see, if I can share any relevant anecdote. So I think, Mayank, that's a interesting question. And I think the course you are pursuing is very relevant to the space as well, right? During YF, I remember the major highlight of my YF program was networking and knowing about different people, what they have done in life, where they aspire to be, and what can I learn from them. And I was maybe fortunately, unfortunately, I was the youngest person in the cohort as well. So everyone had something to share with me, even if I might not have something. So I think that's one thing that you can leverage very well at ISPP, because ISPP, the way I know it, it has an alumni network as well, right? It's a couple of years old program now. So you'll have a good community of people who are already working in the development space. Which you can reach out to, learn from their experience, also figure out which sectors, if you want to enter into a specific sector, or how do you want your career plan to be. Second, I think when you will have a lot of academic relevance as well when you are joining the development space. Unlike maybe a YF program, which is more generalistic in nature and covers courses across the board, you'll have courses specific to how does the policy landscape of India look like, how does policy making generally work, how do you manage big programs. You'll have a lot of expert sessions that the institute might be conducting. So those will also help you a lot in developing those skill sets and improving on your hard as well as soft skills, which will help you in your transition. But Ridham, Rashi, again, this is from my limited experience of transitioning from an academic degree to the space. But if you have anything to add.
I would really like to come in here, Mayank, because, and I would also want to use this opportunity to let you know that I'm an ISPP alum myself. I was a part of the first batch, so happy to share my learnings. It took me like 2 minutes to reflect on what it enabled for me, the institution. And I think it largely enabled 3 things for me that really helped me in my journey during the journey in the impact consulting space. One, I think, which is very basic, and I'm not sure if you've met Professor Shubhashish Gangopadhyay, but the repeated emphasis that he used to make on think, like the word that he would use is think, and think from first principles is what was his favorite word. And I think that is what it enabled for me to really like not kind of go deep into what the research papers are saying, what experts are saying, but before I kind of do that, I also think that what could be the logical solution to the problem presented at hand myself. And I think the first principles thinking is something that comes in very, very handy when you're doing top-down problem solving in the impact consulting space as well. So I think that was the most important thing. Second, I think, again, is something that he only used to emphasize on the use of data and statistics to make decisions in the policy space. So I think that also added to the relevance. While I had an experience in economics, but I know a lot of people who had come from liberal arts and understanding the need to use data and stats to make those decisions in the policy space. So I think that is second that I would emphasize on. And third, I think, is what Naman also mentioned, is just the broad arena that it opens up for you, right? Like to understand, I think, different sectors ranging from education to health to water and sanitation to like so many broad sectors. It just gives you like an overview, at least I would say, of how people are thinking in these sectors and what are the problems that you face. Also kind of helps you at least start out a career with understanding, or at least I would say with an understanding of what problems at least exist and how you can then go about solving for them. So that I think I would say.
Okay. Anisha, you can unmute yourself now.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, yes.
So thank you GDI partners firstly for conducting this workshop, because I think it's very insightful for people like me. So coming I have two questions. So Naman, as you mentioned earlier about the UPSC thing also. So I come from a background where I've been preparing for UPSC for 2-3 years, and I have managed to write mains as well. But I am not sure about, I mean, this consulting thing, social impact consulting is a very new domain for me, and I'm just head starting my career into this. So I am not sure how to go ahead and approach these consulting firms for if I want to apply in these and start my career in this. I mean, how do I switch from my UPSC journey to these consulting firms when I'm not coming from a fellowship background, right? So my first question is this, and my second question is this: if I'm planning for my masters, so I reach out to many people who are into this particular domain, and everyone is doing masters in public policy or administration. But I am not sure, and I'm still confused between what is a better academic degree in terms of this domain, like a master's in public policy or an MBA in development consulting or and management consulting or any other specialization of MBA. So yes, these are my two questions. And yes, if I'm currently, if I'm looking out for full-time job opportunities in this consulting domains, as a fresher, at what roles should I be targeting for applying in these organizations?
Right. To the first question. So Anisha, let's see, you have been an UPSC aspirant for a couple of years. So let's identify the strengths, and out of, on the top of my head, I can identify 2 or 3. First, you know the sector really well, maybe better than all of us, right? Because you have been reading about the sector for the last couple of years, talking to a lot of people and knowing each policy in and out, reading about how governance works, what are the various committees, why they have failed, when they failed, what people have learned from it, what sort of programs are running across the country, etc., etc. So you have a very good understanding about the sector as a whole, and about if you talk about governance consulting roles, about how governments are structured, what are their pros and cons, and how does the job charter also look like for various people. That is first. Second, the immediate thing that comes to my mind when I talk to any UPSC aspirant is the resilience bit. And I think Ridham was mentioning during one of the answers as well. Fellowship also teaches you resilience. UPSC preparation also teaches you the same thing. Third, you have a good story also. You have a good conviction for the sector also, right? A lot of people who don't come from, UPSC aspirant background or fellowship background have a hard time in convincing the interviewers or the firm that they are genuinely interested in the sector. And there's no doubt that you are interested in the sector, right? So these are the 3 things which I can think of works perfectly well for you. And you have to find a way to communicate those aspects whenever you are applying to any job, and also see how can you develop on your maybe communication skills, some problem solving skills. Can you take up some internships which allows you to implement some of these and have some practical implementation experience, work with maybe pro bono with some not-for-profits. And there are a lot of these collectives who help you in connecting to some of these not-for-profits and conduct these programs. So I think those might be some of the things for you.
Right. Okay. Thanks, Naman.
Maybe going to the second question, starting the debate on the second question as well. I think everyone who has been in the space always has this question, if they haven't already pursued a master's degree, whether to go for an MPP degree, MPA degree, MPA ID degree, or MBA degree, or an MBA in development management from maybe ISDM or IRMA or similar institutes, right? And it's an open debate. I don't have any answer for it. I am still struggling to find an answer for myself. But I think all of them, if you are sure that you want to be in the space, then all of them will equip you with relevant skill sets. The difference might be whether you want to approach your career in a more research focused domain, where maybe a MPP degree or MPID degree might be more useful, or whether you want to be in the consulting space or a more practitioner or a management space, where both a MPP degree or a MBA degree will be useful. If you're not sure about the sector, and you might want to shift to other sectors also, then maybe an MBA degree might suit you better. And obviously the main aspect when it comes to these master's courses is also the financial aspect of it, right? Because these are pretty expensive courses, especially if you're planning to pursue it from abroad. So yeah, that's how I think about it generally.
All right. I think we can move on to Mehmood. You can unmute yourself now.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir, for a very insightful discussion. Actually, I had 5 years of experience in government administration. So I was a junior assistant in a government DC office. So I left a permanent government job for a fellowship program. So I am currently a Mahatma Gandhi National Fellow in a very remote district in Arunachal Pradesh. So I've been trying for a job hunt like 3-4 months. So I've been applying in various organizations. So what I am particularly seeing is that, so in government fellowship, it is fellowship salary stipend is decent. It is decent, but in project managerial role or consultant role, the stipend is not matching. So in that case, what should we do? And nowadays, the scenario is like that. The number of fellowships are also increasing, and supply is also increasing, and demand has also got stagnant. And the resumes are also not getting shortlisted most of the times. And also as the stipend as something like I'm getting some stipend, and then as I'm not getting the stipend which the salary which is mentioned in the JD, I'm not happy with that salary. So what should I do? Because the scope gets limited at that point of time. So what should I do in that case? Yes.
I don't think any of us will be able to provide any insights on it, because you come up from a very different profile, and I think Ridham will agree with me when I say ki the only person who is more powerful than a deputy commissioner is the assistant to the deputy commissioner, because he or she defines who will get to meet the commissioner and who will get a meeting slot with them.
So currently I'm a Mahatma Gandhi National Fellow, sir. So I'm from junior assistant to fellowship. I got I moved to fellowship, and I'm under IIM Visakhapatnam. I'm enrolled. So it's been 2 years, and my fellowship program will end in October month only, next month only. So I'm looking for opportunities post fellowship. So I have tried out in various fellowship various opportunities. So in most of the organizations some of the organizations provide similar salaries or less salaries. So it is
So
salary cut happens. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Mehboob, what I suggest is that because this is a one-on-one conversation and this might not be relevant to everyone on the call.
Yes, yes.
So we take
Yes.
it offline, and maybe one of us can connect with you separately to understand more about the context and see if we have any insights to share with you. Does that work?
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
All
Thank
right. Yeah. So since we're way over time, I'll just take one last question. So Ujjwala, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Good evening everyone. So my question is that it is sort of a follow-up question from Anisha's doubt that even I am an ex-UPSC aspirant now, and I wanted to know how the panelists would recommend an ex-UPSC aspirant in terms of how the organizations like GDI and others expect what an ex-UPSC aspirant would answer in the interviews, and how such people like me should approach the concept notes and case study part. This is the first question. And the second question I would like to ask is that how is the growth, I mean the career trajectory in public policy sector as a whole? That's all.
I'll take the first question, and Naman and Rhythm, you can add if you want. So simply to answer your question, Ujjwala, it will be very similar to any other fresher or any other fellowship graduate who is applying for the job role. The questions would be very similar. The case studies would be the same case studies given to a UPSC fellow and a person coming out of a fellowship. So there is no difference in terms of the way interview procedure would look like for you. What matters is, number one, how beautifully, like Naman also pointed out, how you can utilize the experience that you have had during your preparation time. How can you leverage the learnings that you have had there to showcase the value addition that you bring to the consulting team, to the knowledge that you bring to the consulting team during the interview procedure? That is the first point. Second thing that I would suggest you is, maybe you can, similar to how you have done your UPSC preparation, so what kind of different answers look like, you can also take some time and prepare for case interviews, and how do we approach a case problem, how do we structurally think about a problem, break it down into smaller components and solve a case study during interviews. So just do a little bit of prep on that. But apart from that, most of it is what Naman said, is how you demonstrate your experience that you have had during the preparation time. That's it. There's no major difference.
Yeah. Adding on to Rashi's point now, and again, thinking out loud, why don't we think of UPSC preparation as a fellowship only, right? It just doesn't have a tag. But what is the difference between someone who is preparing for a UPSC versus someone who has gone to a Young India Fellowship program, for that matter, right? You have already gone through a lot of, the courses that maybe a person at ISPP or a YF might be reading. You know already about a lot of this stuff. You have interacted with a lot of people. The only difference is that you don't have a certificate, so as to say, right? So I would say, if you start thinking about the UPSC preparation phase also in a self-designed fellowship sort of model, it will maybe overcome us in some of the self-doubt or some of the underconfidence that UPSC aspirants might have when it comes to applications.
And I think I can take the last question, Ujjwala, that you had mentioned around the growth trajectory in public policy. Now, the public policy space is very wide, depending on where you kind of place yourself in the public policy space will make a difference to your growth trajectory. And when I say public policy space is wide, I mean to say that public policy today has aspects of research, has aspects of advocacy, has aspects of implementation, has aspects of just strategy building. So it's a wide space, right? And I can just speak about consulting. I think if in consulting, what really matters is how sharply you can solve problems and how driven you are for your own growth. So if you are driven for your own growth, the opportunities will get created and the trajectory will also move on a pace that you are aligned on. So I don't think so that's a problem once you've set a foot in the door. And I don't think so you should be worrying about, but it'll vary depending on where you place yourselves.
All right. Thanks, Rhythm. So this was the last question for the day. Since we're like way over time now, I think if you feel like some of your questions are not answered or like you didn't get a chance to ask your question, feel free to reach out to us or like any of the panelists post this session. And I think we'll officially conclude our Q&A now. So yeah, thank you everyone for joining, and I hope you have a great weekend.
Thank you so much, everyone. I have dropped the mail IDs in the chat window, Aditi and my mail ID. You can write to us. We'll take all the questions offline now.